Hello everybody and welcome to today's Kindly Learn webinar on transitions, on supporting children after COVID-19. My name's Tracy and I'm the host for this webinar. I'd like to start off, it's a real pleasure to welcome Maureen Hunt with us today. Welcome, Maureen.
Well, good morning everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm really passionate to talk about transitions. Transition is something that I talk about a lot whenever I go around speaking to people, but even more so now with COVID-19, I think this is something that is going to be of a real particular, I was going to say challenge, but I think opportunity is a better word. I think there are going to be opportunities here to have a look at your transition processes and to, really think about things in a different way. My name is at the bottom, my email is at the bottom, and my Twitter handle is at the bottom. And I would love to hear your thoughts on Twitter if you'd like to after this. This would be great. So let's get started. Right, okay, so what are we going to do today? We're going to look at the impact of COVID-19 on children and families, because it's touched all our lives and all our children's lives. We're going to review current practice with regard to transition policy and practice in light of this. I'm going to give you some ideas of how to ensure children's needs are met this year, and I hope I'm going to give you some ideas about how you would like to improve transitions for the future, because as I said, I think we have an opportunity here to think about it in a slightly different way. So what is transition? Well, it's passing or change from one place, we just move that, state or condition to another. That's what the dictionary says, but the early years conference in 2006, Caroline Sharp actually, I think, captured it in a nutshell. The process of making a change from one environment and set of relationships to another. It offers both challenges and opportunities for growth. So I think transition is about relationships and environment. And if you just focus on environment and miss the relationships bit, I think that's where it starts to go wrong. It does offer challenge for children, but actually if you get it right, it has got huge opportunities for growth. So that's a really nice little definition. Let's have a look at some beliefs and attitudes around transition. Some people think it is about just one person's job. Oh, you're in charge of transition, but actually transition and smooth transition is the responsibility of all staff in a school or a setting. It's about preparing children for the demands of a new environment, and children should know how to adapt to the new environments before they experience them. So it's no good just saying, this is your new place and putting people in. They've got to know and understand what that is going to look like before they have to get there. So for it to be successful, we need to have an accurate understanding of children's knowledge, skills, needs and abilities. We need to understand our children, basically. And families play a key point, particularly for very young children. Families will need to be prepared as well. Focusing on children's social, emotional development, as well as their learning process through the transition process, is extremely important. And some transitions are easier than others. Moving from room to room in a nursery might be quite straightforward. Moving from nursery into school is a bigger transition and maybe more difficult and complex. And there is no doubt about it, we need to use our information about our children to adapt the organisation of the school or setting environment and the curriculum. We need to adapt to our children. We shouldn't be expecting our children to adapt to us. So transition has a massive impact. The greatest influence on children's experiences of transition can be to the degree of change they experience. The less change, the smoother the transition. Now, some children will find things more difficult during transition due to their own circumstances, their own individual characteristics or their own needs. But the most impactful transitions are those that involve a move to a completely new physical and social environment. So the ones that are the most challenging are the ones where you've got to try and get the change gradual and minimal. And that's hard, that is hard. but you only have one chance to get this right. It's like that phrase, you've only got one chance to make a good impression. You know, this is a child's journey through their education, and if we put bumps in the road that don't need to be there for them, we can really hold them back, and for some children they may never recover. So what does it usually look like? Well, usually it happens in the summer term. It's something, you know, you might get to sort of Easter and start thinking, oh, what are we doing for transition this year? You might hold open days or events. You might have meet the teacher type of visits. There's usually some sharing of paperwork or data goes on. And then there is things like informing parents of what the expectations are and the policies are of the new school or setting. And then you might have a little bit of experiencing a day or a session in your new class or your new room. But how many of these will have happened this year? Probably very few, and probably very few will. Now, we don't know whether or not schools and settings will go back to before September, but even if they do, it's going to be very, very unlikely that things will be as they were before, and it will be very unlikely that the traditional transition type activities will be able to take place. So then when you look at the impact of COVID-19, most families will have been affected in some way or another by COVID-19. It has touched all our lives in some way or another. Children will have picked up on stresses caused by health, financial worries, social distancing, and the changes to their lives. Everyone's had a change to their life. Many families have got financial difficulties. Some families have got health issues. Even if they haven't got any of those, they will have picked up on the culture of fear, that you can't avoid it, with adults talking all the time about what they can and can't do. And suddenly a world that was safe for a child is suddenly not safe anymore. Add to that, they had a sudden and unwanted change. They were just settling into their preschools, nurseries, reception classes, whatever it was, and suddenly they're not allowed to go anymore. They can't see their friends, they can't see their teachers. The adults that are caring for them may be stressed, they may be anxious, they may be unwell themselves, and routines will certainly have been disrupted, celebrations put on hold, and sadly, some children will have lost relatives and friends in this process. You know, the sad fact is that people are dying, and that some children will have experienced that. And that will, of course, trauma. All of those things, if you look up the definitions of childhood trauma, are really in there written large, and children will suddenly not feel as safe and secure in their world as they did before. Now, if you add to that there will undoubtedly be some children that will have been experienced the toxic triangle. If they are living in a home where there is domestic abuse, mental ill health and substance misuse, we call that the toxic triangle. And the outcomes for children living in those circumstances are really poor. So there is an increase in the UK of people suffering with domestic abuse. I'm sure that it hasn't passed by anybody's notice really that mental ill health is a massive concern during this pandemic, and a lot of people will be using substances to help and alleviate their mental health problems. So there will be children that will be coming back to you that will have been in that environment. And they won't come with a label. They won't come with a label that says, I'm highly traumatized, I'm just a little bit traumatized. You won't know. So it is safe to assume that all children will have experienced trauma of some sort. And what will that look like? Well, they may be wary of adults. There may be a lack of trust. The people they trusted to keep them safe suddenly weren't there anymore. They may have difficulty separating from their adult carers. They might want to cling on to people. They may have poor self-regulation skills, unable to control their emotions. They might be acting out, being, tantrums, all sorts of things. Hypervigilance is one, on the lookout for danger. Children who look stressed and are very hyperactive, particularly young children, it's easy to misdiagnose that and to, gosh, they've got ADHD or something similar. Actually, they just may be suffering from trauma. They will have poor attention skills. They may not be able to concentrate for long periods of time. And you may see some physical regression, wetting, etc. And then, of course, there are the things that, you know, we're quite used to looking out for in young children: physical symptoms, tummy aches, headaches, etc. When children feel anxious and stressed, those things often come out with them.
Maureen, we've had somebody saying, yeah, they've had parents already getting in touch about, you know, regression in toileting and sleep patterns. So yeah, people are seeing that already.
Yeah.
There was a question regarding the toxic triangle. Would this include drinking more alcohol? And I think
Absolutely.
that's a really good question. Thanks, Lorraine.
Yes, absolutely. Once it tips over into the misuse part of that, I mean, you know, all adults, or not all adults, but most adults like a drink and have a little drink to relax. Once it tips over into the misuse, then yes, it does very much contribute to the toxic triangle. Children who are in households where parents are misusing alcohol and self-soothing with their alcohol, that, you know, and self-medicating, that is part of the toxic triangle. When you add all that up, there's going to be a lot of children that are going to experience that. So if they're returning to school or returning to your setting, they will need a different kind of support. And lots of people, and I imagine lots of people on this call, have thought, gosh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about transition? This caused a flurry of panic. But I want you to think about it as a spotlight for reflection and review, and to think about these key questions, really. How can we ensure that we meet the needs of the children and families that are moving on from us and are new to us now? So that's the first thing. That's what are we going to do this year. Then what should we put in place to ensure that we're prepared if anything like this happens again? That's a very good question, because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you think, goodness me, it's happened again, and we're still not ready. And I think the most important question is, what can we build and do differently that will be better than what we did before? And there's the opportunity, because I think you are going to have to do things differently this year. And some of those things you might think, actually, this is better. This is much better than we did before. But one thing is for sure, we cannot flick a switch and expect our children to go back to normal. Children suffering from any level of trauma can't just flick back into, you know, where they were before. They may be anxious returning to a place where they thought they were safe. Their trust in adults may be shaken. And if you think about the parents as well, there are lots of parents who are going to be really anxious about sending their child back to a school or a setting, and they are going to need support as well. And their anxiety will rub off on their children. So you can't just, a child who was happy to walk through the door and get on and play may suddenly decide to cling to their parent or carer's leg and not want them to leave. That's likely to be happening. So you've got to be ready for how you are going to really make sure that you are in a position to support children and parents, and to take things very, very gently. I think if there's one message here, it's go gentle with this. It will be necessary to provide a relationship-rich environment for them to return to, where adults are there to gently support them to feel safe again. Because if they don't feel safe, they won't learn. Relationship-rich environments are where people are at the centre. Curriculum is at the centre here. People have got to be at the centre. We've got to build those bonds again. So if you do have a child that is really struggling to cope and may have meltdowns for no apparent reason, your only one job is to help them regulate their feelings and bring them back into a state of calm. And here's a list of things that can help with this. Name it to tame it. So you've got to acknowledge children's feelings. You know, are you scared? Are you frightened? Are you anxious? Acknowledge their feelings. It's no good saying, oh, come on, it'll be all right. You know, mummy's got to go now. You'll be fine. Actually, that's proven not to help. It's okay to sit down with the child and say, I can see you're scared. That's okay. Set up spaces of calm away from sensory stimulation. Nice quiet areas, cushions, maybe somewhere where you can have calming music and adults who can sit and spend time calming children. Teach breathing techniques. If you look them up, children's breathing techniques that you can teach children to help them regulate their breathing, which will in turn help them regulate their emotions. Things that will distract them and help them are things like glitter jars, snow globes, sensory bottles, lots of variety and choice of things. Blankets, cushions, soft furnishings, and allowing access to comforters when needed. I mean, some settings have a policy that toys that come from home go up on the shelf until home time. This isn't the time for that. If a child is bringing a transitional object into nursery with them, it's the time is to let them have that, because that is probably their only anchor to where they feel safe at the moment. So I don't know if you've heard of Minnie Kongpire. Minnie Kongpire is absolutely passionate about neuroscience and the effects on the developing brain. And if you don't know of her, I would suggest you look her up and on Twitter and have a read of some of her work. She talks about self-regulation and about supporting children through their emotions in a way that is so easy to understand. So I wanted to credit her in these slides because this is one of her slides. She talks about attunement, listening to and engaging with children, tuning into their needs. You must have a strong and effective key person system so that you've got the practitioners that are building the relationships with children on hand wherever possible to be with those children. That will in turn build a bond, because only by building a bond will you be able to build trust with children so they feel safe again. And communication, hugely important. We talk about communication a lot when we talk about modelling the correct way of speaking, modelling language. Actually, this isn't about that. This is about building trust through talking with children and listening to them and really trying to understand them and help them to reach out and express their thoughts and feelings. What I want you to think about now, because we've ended up in a situation where an awful lot of people have left their transition processes to the summer term and they're not happening. But I want you to think of transition as a different thing now. I want you to think of it as a journey, as a process and not an event. So if you view it as a process rather than a one-off event, then aspects of good early years practice will ensure a better, smooth transition for the child and family. If you think about the EYFS and the early years, children move around a lot. There are lots and lots of transitions. And what we don't want is for children to go from one environment and then into another one that is completely different and another one that's completely different after that. And for them constantly be thinking, well, what's going on here? Who are my people here? What? Yesterday I had to sit on the carpet for snack. Today I don't have to. What can you do as you work through your transition processes to align your practice so that it becomes an event, not an event, but a process for the children and family. It isn't supposed to be a series of events, but an ongoing alignment of practice with the child at the centre and the developing child at the centre. So that doesn't mean that everything has to be the same all the time. What it means is that as children grow and develop and as they make their transitions, you build on what's gone before and you introduce change gradually. So we're going to have a look now at some of the ideas of things that we can do now and some of the things that maybe you can do in the future to support your children. Now, I'm going to suggest throw lots and lots of things out at you here. Not everything is going to be relevant for your families and your children. Not everything's going to be relevant for your context. So what I want you to think about is, what does this raise for you? What kind of ideas does this plant in your mind? What, you will come up with, for every one of my ideas, you may come up with 10 of your own. It's supposed to stimulate your own planning and your own ideas. So don't take it as a, well, I can't do that because, take it as a, well, what can I do that is going to help me in each of these areas. So the first thing we're going to look at is connecting with parents. Now, that will depend hugely on whether or not our social distancing rules are lifted, or whether or not we are actually allowed to have gatherings. But I'm going to assume for most parents at the moment, that's not happening. So this is a really round, what can you do if social distancing is in place, and then you can build on that if it isn't. So I think what we're doing today, having a Zoom call or chat, is a really good thing to do, and you may well get most parents agreeing to do that for if you've got new parents coming in with children. However, what I would suggest you don't do on that call is start telling them everything you've got to know about coming to school or your setting. They won't take it in. It will overwhelm them. It may even confuse them. Use it as an opportunity to build a relationship with them that is focused on their child. So your opening sentence could be, you know, lovely to meet you, nice to talk to you. Can't wait till Billy, or whatever the child's name is, comes into our setting. We're really looking forward to having him. Tell me about him. Get parents to talk. Get them to tell you what their children are interested in. Get them to tell you about their favourite toys, their games, their personality, how they were in their last setting. Get parents to voice their concerns. They'll have lots of concerns, and that's fine. But if you don't get them out in the open, you can't deal with them. And their hopes, what are they hoping for? Really try and build a picture. Use it as a time to listen. The more time you spend developing a relationship with the parents now, the smoother it will be when the child starts. Gently explore their experiences during lockdown, changes of routine, loss, trauma, how they've affected the child and the family, but be very aware. Some families may have been, you know, in that toxic triangle, and some may be very cagey and not want to talk too much. So don't probe too deeply, but just try and get a picture. What's life been like for them for the last few months? You know, what difficulties have they faced? And I imagine for some families, the difficulties have been, you know, considerable, and for some of them, they will want to talk about that. You know, give them the time, let them air those issues. If possible, and again, if this all depends, if social distancing is you know, lifted, do a home visit. Some families, let's face it, won't engage with technology anyway, so you're going to have to try and make a connection with them as best you can. And if you can do a home visit, that will work. Home visits are fantastic. To see the child in their own context will tell you an awful lot about what to expect when they come into your school or setting. Now, you can't ignore the fact that there's a lot that parents will need to know about their child coming in, but actually you can do things like video blogs, online packs for them. You can make things really engaging, like today we're going to talk about PE kit and put up a little PE blog. Let's have a little video of the lunch hall. This is where children eat their lunch. These are the kinds of things that happen at lunchtime in this school. You can give information in a way that is less overwhelming and actually more engaging. And then those little videos, they can sit there on your school website for, you know, ad infinitum really, and you can use them and adapt them and update them as you see fit. Reassure parents it's going to be a gentle approach. The focus is going to be on settling their children and make them feel that they are part of that and that you are going to work together. This isn't a time for you to be saying, right, leave mummy at the door. You know, let the parents in, let them really make sure they know that their child is happy and settled before they leave. If you don't, they'll be anxious, and that anxiety will build and it will reflect on the child. So you could consider setting up a little area for parents to stay and chat when their children arrive if they want to. Just stay for half an hour and have a cup of tea, and then pop their head round the door just to see their child playing. That will go a long way. And then this is the bit that people often don't do. They don't review transition processes in the round. They don't go back and ask parents in the future, how was it for you? Did you get all the information you needed? Did you feel that your child was, we were well prepared for your child and we did the right things? Always review your transition processes. Always ask parents how it was for them, and actually make sure that if what you learn from that, you build into your processes for next year. So that's your parents. Then obviously you'll want to connect with your children as well. So some things that some people are doing, which I think are working quite well, they're setting up little story time sessions. So just having you online reading a story to children will get them used to your voice and the way that you are. And if you can do it in the environment of the school, so they get to see the school in the background, that will help. Introduce them to some class mascot or teddy or something along those lines that is waiting to meet them. Now, if you've got that little anchor now, when they come into class, they'll recognise that teddy or that, whatever it is, or the doll or the bear or whatever. That will act as an anchor for them. Get children themselves to post pictures online about getting ready for school. So how are you going to get ready for school? Are you buying, let's have pictures of them getting their uniforms, if you have a uniform, or whatever it is, get them to send a picture of themselves, put it up on the website. Obviously you'll need to get the relevant permissions for this, but it all helps children feel connected. What you want to do is build a connection here with your children. Then think about what knowledge that you gain from parents to plan activities that reflect children's interests. If you know what children are interested in before they come, you can plan an environment and the activities to support them, so there's something to hook them in when they get there. And then put the key systems in place, key person systems in place, and spend time getting to know the child, even if it's just a chat. And I've already said this, allow transitional objects and comforters into the setting, make sure children feel safe. Okay. Now, if you're in a school and you are a reception class teacher, I think one of the greatest opportunities you've got here, and you might not be able to do it this year, depends if your school is closed or not, but for future use, is to get children involved in planning for children to come to school. Use it as a learning opportunity for them. So they could make a film about the school, look at using a camera, going around at child height, talking about the indoor and the outdoor environment. Usually the spaces that children are most anxious about are toilets, lunch halls, PE, things like that. So get children to actually make little films and talk about it. Interview some teachers, showcase their classrooms or the outdoor area, send out links to families. We could get children to write a letter about the school, about the things they like, and it could be posted out to new parents, or make books about starting school, my favourite things about school. They could make the books and they could read them online to children. One lovely idea I saw was children in their geography curriculum were making maps of the school to give out to families of the younger children coming into school. You can use transition as a learning opportunity, and also what that will then give you is feedback about the transition and what it was like for the child. I remember I said looking at reviewing transition in the round, getting children's opinions about how it was for them when they started school or in your setting is really important as well.
Maureen, can I just interrupt there for a second? There's a lot going on in chat about the effects of how socially distancing might be managed. Now, I think the first thing to say is until we've got specific guidance on this, it's all quite hypothetical anyway. So I think at some stage we'll look to do another webinar on how we can manage and interpret the guidelines that we are given at that time. And I appreciate it will be different on a country by country basis. But there is a conversation going on about letting parents in, you know, because obviously during handovers, that process of handing over is very crucial. And also, again, I think this will be maybe on a setting basis, but the fact that toys or comforters, you know, whether they can actually be brought in, or bags being unhygienic or anything like that. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on those two views.
Yeah, I mean, I have. My whole premise around this is we should not be putting our children or our families in a position where they're not safe. So my whole ethos around this transition is it is now safe for your children to be going to school, and you will be given guidelines around how to, keep them safe. I'm not going to go there because, as you quite rightly say, we don't know what they are yet, but we will have to work within the guidelines. But if we are in a position, in my opinion, where it's not safe for parents to come into school with their child, where it's not safe to bring objects into school, where it's not safe for children to connect with other children while they're in there, I don't think they should be there. So I'm really hoping that we are in a position when all of this happens, whereby it is a safe environment. And actually, it might be that a toy coming into school has to be wiped as it comes in through the door, and children have to be washing their hands regularly on the hour or whatever. But whatever those guidelines are, we'll wait and see what they are. But I really do sincerely hope we are never in this position where we are telling parents you can't come in because it's not safe. And if it's not safe for them, it's not safe for the children, it's not safe for the teachers, so we shouldn't really be there. But we will have to wait and see on that, won't we?
Absolutely, that's really helpful. Thanks, Maureen.
Okay. So paperwork, there's always a lot of focus on paperwork when it comes to transition. People write reams and reams of notes, and they pass them on to new teachers and etc. But a lot of it falls by the wayside because people cannot cope with too much information. They won't read it. So, get a welcome pack ready, able to be downloaded if you can put it on your website, in a variety of languages if it's needed, and keep it really down to what do people really need to know now. Not what do they need to know forever about the school, but what do they need to know now. You might need to deliver packs. I've seen lots of things on Twitter where teachers have been out delivering welcome packs to families. That's fine if you've got a relatively small catchment area and you can do that. Possibly some will need it online, some might need it in actual form, but whatever's right for you and your children. But my real thing here is do not overwhelm families with too much information. Transition documents often focus on the teacher or the practitioner's perception of the child. They really need to capture everyone's views, the parent, the child, the setting, etc. So have a look at your transition documents and ask yourself, does this tell me how the parent views the strengths of this child and the needs of this child? Does this tell me about the child? Does the child have an input here? Have they been able to tell me about their favourite things and I've put this down in the transition document? Again, make sure it's not overwhelming, but it does have a 360 view of this child. And then if you've got any children with additional needs, review their paperwork really well in advance so that you are well prepared for them, because they bring a whole heap of other things that you might have to put into place in order to be fully prepared. And the last thing you want is for children to end up on your doorstep on day one that have got additional needs and you are not ready for them, because that whole process will be not only upsetting for the child, it will devastate the family. And like I said, you've got one chance to get this right. So that's really, really important. So this is the little bit that I think is a more forward facing. I think if you think about the alignment of your practice, actually getting your practice aligned with what's gone before and what comes after, I think there's really is room for growth here. Working with previous setting staff or setting staff, where your child is going to, talk about systems and practices, anything from how do they do circle time, how do you have snack. Interestingly, one of the schools that I worked with last year had a nursery on site literally across the hall from the reception class, and on the nursery they were doing jolly phonics, and in the school they were doing letters and sounds. So children who were leaving nursery, having been started on jolly phonics programs, suddenly found themselves in a reception class across the hall doing letters and sounds. And it wasn't till the two practitioners and teachers started talking together that they realized how confusing and how ridiculous that was. So when you start talking to people about what's gone before and what comes afterwards, it will unearth a whole heap of things that you can be better aligned at, so that children don't have to experience all these changes at once. So create opportunities for ongoing dialogue going forward. So linking school and preschool Senkos together to talk about children's needs is massively helpful. School Senkos can usually afford one meeting a term, perhaps, to sit down and talk to Senkos from preschools about children that are coming up, and talk together about what's happening with that child, what support they're going to need, what they've got now, things so that they can contribute maybe to their EHCP plans, etc. Understand fully what has gone before and what comes after is key here. So thinking about routines that you can align and develop together. You know, how do you do your snack time? How do you do your home reading policy? Things along those lines. And if you can, and of course you might not be able to do that this year, but in the future, visit settings to see children in their environment so that you get a really good understanding. If you are lucky enough to be having children coming back to you that you had before, that were due to move on to a new class or a new room, have a think about what you can do so that that is not a sudden change. Bearing in mind these children will have missed a lot of their time. You know, their period of time for us is long enough, but for a child it's forever. They may well have forgotten almost everything about the setting and the school before they left. So if you can go back into something that was familiar to them, for instance having the same key workers for a while, that will really help them. Maybe you could even delay transitions for a few weeks. Think, actually, these reception class children are due to go into year one, but we'll just pretend they're reception until half term, if you can. Not saying everybody can do that, not everyone's got the space, not everyone's got the structure, but where you can, have a go at seeing if you can keep things as they were for just a little while. If you can't, have a look at environments. Can they be set up in a similar way to the previous one? I talk a lot about, when I go out, about the massive big jump from reception to Key Stage 1 and how different those classrooms can often look. And actually, with a bit of thought and a bit of effort, you could probably make your year 1 classroom look a similar way to the reception one for a little while and then gradually change it. And then, sorry, go on.
So the comment there, of course, that a lot of staff are being furloughed, so it's hard
yes.
to, you know, when key staff are currently not working.
I know, and to be honest, that's something that you're just going to have to think about what you can do from here and what you can't do. And if you are completely furloughed, I'm hoping you won't be furloughed right up to the point where you go back in to a school or a setting. You know, I'm hoping you'll get some lead time. You'll be able to pick some of these ideas up. If you can't, you know, you have got to just be aware of how you're going to cope when you get back. What are we going to do? If you've been furloughed, the best thing to do is to go back to what was it like before you start to think about moving on. It's not easy. It's not easy, and there is no magic wand here. This is around developing thoughts and ideas and trying to think of creative things. Obviously, I'd set up an ongoing dialogue for communication around practice. And if you can do that with preschools into schools, that makes a massive, massive difference. And I think one of the really key things, and we've touched on it before, is well-being. plan in plenty of opportunities for playing and socializing and talking about things. And particularly if you can't do anything else because you've been furloughed, you can do this. You can actually think, curriculum isn't central here, well-being is central here. I am going to plan in plenty of opportunities for my children to play. Maybe you could set up a home role play area. Perhaps the class Teddy's been poorly. Get children to play in there, get adults to play with the children, be on hand to support and listen to children that are there playing, because their concerns will come out around health through that play, and you'll be able to address them. So talk lots about feelings and emotions, make that a central part of your day. Give children time to feel secure. And if you can access any local authority support from your ed psych or your bereavement support, have a look and see what's out there. There's a lot out there that will be able to help you. There's quite a lot about trauma informed schools out there at the moment, if you Google that as well. But I would put well-being very much at the centre of what you do when these children come back. And then behaviour is going to be a big issue for some children. So children will not be able to, some children won't be able to revert instantly back into routines. They may well have forgotten just simply that, but for some that have experienced trauma and loss, they may act out. This is just masking their fear and anxiety. This is a way of saying, what I am doing physically is showing you I am scared, I'm anxious, I'm frightened, and I can't cope with what's going on around me. So a gentle approach to understanding how children may be feeling is needed here, and space and time to feel safe. And that goes back to the stuff I said at the beginning about how to help children with their self-regulation. So putting self-regulation skills at the heart of your practice is going to be really important.
Maureen, we've had a lot of comments saying any advice on helping younger children transition back to their settings, but maybe those with babies, or those going back to childminders, or even new starters into childminding settings is going to be very tricky too.
Yeah, I mean, all of these principles apply, I think. Doesn't matter how old the child is, these all apply. Take it very slowly, take it very gently. Work with the parent as much as the child. If the parent doesn't feel safe, the child won't feel safe. So you're going to have to take it very, very gently, really.
That's great. Thank you, Maureen.
And then finally, really, take your time. There is no need to rush to get children to catch up. They don't need to catch up with anything. They are where they are. Children are where they are, and it is your job to support them so they can move on. It is not your job to think that's where they should be, therefore I'm going to have to accelerate their learning now to get them to catch up. It will be a waste of time, it'll be a waste of energy, and actually, you aren't doing the child any favours. You can't rush development. Development happens at the pace in which the child needs it to happen at. So don't be sucked into this, oh, they've missed 6 months school, or they missed 6 months of their, learning. I've got to rush to get them ready for school. I've got to rush to get them ready for the next stage. No, that's not your job. Your job is to work with the child as they are now and help and support them. And building a rich relationship environment now will pay dividends in the future, because anxious and frightened children can't learn, and anxious parents can't fully support their children either. So those have got to be your number one priorities. So if you think that successful transitions are a process and not an event, it allows you to think more widely. And it allows you to think about how you can make the child's journey through education as smooth as possible. So if anything like this happens in the future, you know that you've got a structure in place that is not wholly dependent on events. It is actually about a child's journey, and actually where they are in that journey when they come back is manageable, because they are part of this whole system of it being a process where a practice is aligned and people are working together to make the journey for the child as smooth as possible. And one of the things I talk about is, it should be gentle bridges for them to cross, not hurdles for them to leap over. And that's the end. So lots in there. I hope it's stimulated lots of ideas for you. As I say, it's not a do this, do this, do this. It's supposed to generate ideas for you to take forward, really. So any questions? Tracy, over to you.
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Maureen. That was excellent, so helpful. Thank you. And also thank you to everybody who has contributed ideas and comments as we've been going along. They've been very helpful, Maureen, in answering questions themselves. So I will send round just a shortened summary of the comments, just so if there was any advice in there that you may have missed from other people, which I think is really lovely to get. The only question I think that we haven't really addressed is about those who are childminders who at the moment have children going to multiple schools. So they may have 6, 7, 8 schools that they're supposed to be liaising with. Any advice on how that might be possible to manage?
It's going to be hugely tricky, and I think the first thing to do is to make sure that the schools are completely aware of your situation and your circumstances, and that they try and make some time for you when you can go and talk to them about these children, if that's your role. It depends very much whether or not you are responsible for taking all these children to school yourself, or whether you're just picking up from school and parents have dropped them on. Your individual context will dictate how you operate here. But I think the most important thing is that you make everybody aware that you are in the position that you're in, and that you're trying to support all these children and families, and you ask the schools and the settings to work with you to help you do that, because they might want to give you staggered times, for instance, to bring children in, or they may want to say, well, actually I can spare you 10 minutes at the end of the day and we can have a chat. It all depends on your particular context, but you can't really do it without telling people, this is the situation I'm in. I've got 5 children, two at this school, 3 at this school, and 1 in nursery, and I really want to make sure that they come back and that they're safe and they're happy. Can you help me and support this? So I would make sure that everyone's aware.
Great, thank you. We've had a question, would you advise to record in a safeguarding folder any behaviour changes?
Now, well, that really does depend on the level of the behaviour changes. If you see any behaviours that suggest that children have been or subject to abuse, then obviously yes. If you've got problems with children who are just taking time to settle in, they'll be there forever if you're trying to record all of that. So you have to use your professional discretion, and that the systems that are in place for you for safeguarding and the advice of your designated safeguarding officer, you need to be able to kind of look and try and judge the difference between a child that you think, this child has definitely been subject to abuse or is subject to abuse, and this child has just got issues that will help, and that we can help with over time. There's no blanket right or wrong answer to that. I can't say yes and I can't say no. You have to know your children, you have to know your families, and you have to be able to use your professional discretion, as in all safeguarding issues, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. We're getting a lot of thanks and everything. I think we are getting some questions about toys and things like that, but I think we're going to have to address those once there's more of a clear idea of what guidelines we're going to be expected to adhere to.
We can't answer those questions till we know what the regulations are. But yeah, like I say, I'm hoping these children go back into an environment that's considered to be safe.
Yes, absolutely. I think everybody really appreciated you making that point. I think that's critical. Thank you. I think that's it. Would you be able to move the slides forward for me?
Yes, certainly.
So thank you for everybody for attending. And one thing we do all want to make sure you do is just reflect on everything you've heard today and everything that Maureen has put out to us, and to just reflect on how you may implement that and what sort of impact it may have on your setting, your school, your nursery, your practice. So we really encourage you to reflect on that. And on the next slide then, I think we've got a reminder of our next webinar for next week,
which is working together. So really working with those parent partnerships to promote early home learning. We've got Ali McClure talking to us about that. Different times for the UK, 11:30 for the UK, 2:30 for anybody in the Middle East and in that area. And if you would like, and then the final slide, Maureen, if that's okay, if you would like to keep up to date with all of the webinars that we're doing at the moment, you can join our Facebook group at, the links are there, facebook.com/kinderly.co.uk. And just also to let you know, we've launched a new Pinterest account as well with lots of lovely ideas for supporting children, families and lockdown activities at the moment. So please do, as I say, we'll be sending around these links so you'll be able to have them on your screen. Okay, so thank you everybody again for attending today. I hope you found that very worthwhile. I'm sure it has been helpful. And a huge thank you to Maureen for such a great presentation today. Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks very much. I hope to see you all on Twitter. I'd like some Twitter conversations. That would be brilliant.
Well, absolutely. Head to Twitter now and start a conversation with Maureen. Yeah, if I have missed anybody's question today, there were lots coming through. I tried to group them in themes rather than individuals. So maybe if there are further questions you'd like to ask, you can move over to Twitter to do that. Okay, that's great. Stay safe, everybody. Lovely to have you here, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.